Hey board gamers, how's it going? It's Mike Cassie here with another episode of the Weirdwood Manor board game vlog. Thanks for joining me. So in this episode, we've got another interview for you, one that I think is going to be really interesting for all of our viewers. If you're someone who already knows Weirdwood, you'll probably be pretty excited about who I'm about to talk to today. And if you are here for the board game and you don't know much about Weirdwood, it's a great opportunity to learn more about the lore in the world. So who am I talking to today? Well, today I'm going to sit down and talk to Christian McKay Heidicker, a Newbery award-winning author of a series of books about, well, set in the Weirdwood universe. The first book, Thieves of Weirdwood, came out a couple years ago, followed by Ghosts of Weirdwood, and there's the third book coming out next year, Nightmares of Weirdwood. So without further ado, let's sit down and talk to Christian. Well, welcome everybody, and the first thing I got to say to Christian is thank you so much for joining us and taking the time. Super appreciated, super excited to have you here.
My absolute pleasure to be here. It's so wonderful to meet you. Your board game is looking phenomenal. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. Well, if it's 10% as good as the books, then we'll be in great shape. So
now I'm blushing.
Okay, so before we get into some interesting questions, so obviously hopefully we've got people here from like the Weirdwood universe who already know and love your books, but we've probably got board gamers here who are just discovering Weirdwood. So why don't you start by just sort of introducing yourself, who you are, what you do, and what kind of cool and exciting things are going on in your world?
Phenomenal. Okay, so my name is Christian McKay Heidicker. I am a children's author, and I find my favorite playground is middle grade. So all of the books for 8 to 12-year-olds. And yeah, when I was given the opportunity to come and write in the Weirdwood universe and heard that the magic system was essentially transforming art into actual spells and creatures and ways of moving the world, I was like, what a phenomenal opportunity to talk to kids about just how powerful their artistic abilities are. So that's what really drew me in. Yeah, I'm best known for my book Scary Stories for Young Foxes, which won a Newbery honor last year. And
Right. Yeah.
as far as what I'm working on, I've been hacking away at my first graphic novel in between drafts of the third Weirdwood book, of course, which I am
Wow.
actually super excited about. I think it's going to be my favorite installment once I clean it up a little bit.
Right. Right.
Kind
Well,
of a
that's cool.
disaster right now, like all early art, right? Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So graphic novel is interesting. So I'm kind of curious, you're writing that, are you working like with an illustrator or will an illustrator come in later? Like how does that process transpire for you?
So, I that's a fantastic question. From what I've learned, the process is usually that the author and editor sit down and refine the script and make it phenomenal, and then somewhere probably I would assume like at the 60 to 80% mark start searching for artists. I'm still in like the very beginning outline phase. Truthfully, I want to bring on an artist as soon as possible. When I was
Right.
studying comic book scripts and things, I noticed that my favorite comic book artists or writers like Neil Gaiman or Alan Moore are in touch with the artist like from the word go,
Right.
and then they can say things. Gaiman is famous for asking his artists what they like to draw, and then he includes it in the story, which I think
Ah,
is really beautiful. And yeah, I would love to co-build this world with an artist, but not even at that point yet where I could share the world details. So
right, right, right.
yeah.
Well, that idea that obviously, when people probably think of you, they maybe think of, that you're an author. which is
Yeah.
true. And though I also think of it in terms of that, you're essentially, from my perspective, you're also a creator. Like you're creating things. It's about not just creating a story, but creating the characters, creating the world they inhabit.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious, like specific to a project like Weirdwood, where there was an existing universe with some lore and some characters already in place.
Hmm.
Is the process of trying to write for an existing universe a lot different than when you're sort of creating something from scratch and it's all coming out of your head right from the initial get-go? Like, how does that change things for you?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So, like there are some restrictions to it, obviously, which is always really healthy for an artist. Having boundaries
Right.
around what you can do, so that you can see just how high you can grow that beanstalk, right?
Right.
Um, and that's true in terms of like the lore and how the magic works and everything. And then, of course, there is a lot of opportunity there to reach for new heights and for new and interesting elements of this world, because the foundation has already been built, and so I can reference this work that exists and then put my own spin on it, which has allowed me to do the most complex, twists and turns and plotting of any book that I've ever had, or that I've ever written, because so much of the foundation was already there. The
Right.
interesting thing about these books is that they're they're the best of both worlds, because it takes place more than 100 years in the past. Yeah, the foundation is there in terms of
Right.
lore and magic and things, but it's also a fairly clean slate,
Right.
And Wasabi gave me a list of characters and just sort of a general idea of what they wouldn't mind seeing. But honestly, they really gave me free reign to play with things, including finding ways of making the characters my own,
Right.
which I really appreciated. And I think that the best example of that is Breath, the little ghost girl.
Right.
In the Weirdwood apps, the ghosts are these, sort of floating blue crystalline beings. And I wanted to do something a little bit unique with this particular ghost. And so I sat down with a friend of mine who is also a fantasy author, Matthew J. Kirby, and he helped me brainstorm different approaches to ghosts that we'd never seen before. We spent like 5 hours on it. And until we developed, this idea of a little ghost that can possess dead matter, right?
Right.
And
Right.
that felt new and exciting, and Wasabi gave me the go ahead. So yeah, it's been nice to have, like, not only like the restrictions in terms of lore and magic, but also the ability to play and stretch things a little bit and be like, well, what if, before
Right. Right.
Arthur of Weirdwood is there, things are a little dicier here or stranger here, and yeah, it's really fun.
It's both, yeah. So it's both restrictive, but also kind of freeing at the same time. It kind of touches both ends of that spectrum, maybe, right?
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. It's funny, even mentioning Breathe is really interesting. So, in the board game, we're taking characters from the world there, and just like you looked at the ghosts in the original app and said, how would I reinterpret those ghosts? And overall, you want to stay true to the overarching lore, but you're trying to like stretch it out, expand what they are and what they do and what their role is in the universe.
Hmm.
I took Breathe as a character and she's in the board game, and I'm like, okay, so
Yes.
here's what Breathe is, here's what she is in the game, in the books, and how she works and functions. Like, how does that then translate into the board game to still be true to your vision,
Oh my
but work in
gosh.
the context of the board game? So it's a really, I mean, so I kind of, I know what you're talking about. It's both challenging but also really fun and freeing to kind of be able to do that, right?
Is there like well, I don't want to really spoil anything, but like, will you just tell me a little bit more about? Is there like a breathe mechanic? Is there?
Yes, there is. So there are core characters in the game, and there's like companions. So like a core character in our game, Wally is a core character, for example,
Hmm.
but Breathe is sort of a companion character, and so she has a power in the game that, again, thinking about the books and how she can kind of become, I was thinking how she becomes something else. Like she's still Breathe, but when she's in like a chair or something like that, she's sort of, it's like she's that chair also.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like thematically in the game, she allows players to take on the characteristics or the powers of other players. Essentially, she kind of allows them to sort of
Smart.
be that other thing in the game.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's
So
very smart. I like that a lot. That's cool. Way
cool,
cool.
cool,
Yeah.
nice. All right, yeah. Um, I was going to ask you. So obviously, you've been heavily involved with the Weirdwood universe now for a while. Start going back to the first book, Thieves and Ghosts is out now, and the third book we'll talk about in a little bit. I know that's coming out hopefully not too long next year, I guess. I'm kind of curious. Again, maybe this talks to stepping into an existing kind of world and what's going on. But since you've been working on it, we've got this world that now has a new app coming out. It's got your books. We're working on a board game. There's a feature film in development. Do you get really excited about seeing something you work on kind of go into other mediums? Is that kind of new to you? How do you feel about that?
100% new. Yeah, and it's really exciting. I mean, I think the first time that I um, received copies of these books in the mail, or saw, a little video of your board game, or see sketches from the app, it
Right.
feels like it awakens my inner child, right? Where I would be in love with a character or a world or whatever, and then you walk, through bookstores with your parents or the mall or whatever, and
Yeah,
you just
sure.
catch this glimpse of a face that you really adore and know well and is close to your heart. And so every time I see these characters in different contexts, I get that like little kid excitement again,
Right.
and then have to sort of remind myself that I am part of that. That I didn't start it, but I get to play in that world, and I get to build along with them, and that it's thrilling. It's really really cool. And fortunately, they hire smart and interesting people to work on this stuff, and so I never have to like grit my teeth about what might
Right.
be. So far, I'm gonna
So far,
so
right.
far, just in case the day is July
Well, I'm glad Breathe
22nd,
got the stamp of
2021.
approval.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah, that's just really exciting stuff. Yeah, do you feel the same way? Like, uh,
You know, that's a really great point. I was thinking about that as you were talking about it, and before I started working the board game, I played the app. I read Ghosts, which I really
oh,
enjoyed,
thank you.
and obviously got to know the young Arthur, and I got to know Wally, and Wally kind of really struck a chord for me as a character. I really enjoyed his story and his character's personality in the world. And since reading Ghosts, we went through the process of starting to design the board game, and Wally is one of the characters in the board game. And then I read since reading
Yeah,
Thieves, we started working the board game, and then I read Ghosts just I think in the last couple months,
cool.
roughly. And it was interesting to go and open this up, and there's Wally again, and I had a picture of Wally still, obviously from the first book, but the picture of him had shifted like a tiny bit because I'd had some involvement in the board game. So, it's funny you've thrown the question back at me. I'm not certain I've thought about it a lot, but it is cool that sort of that the way things sort of stitch together in that experience,
Yeah,
especially when there's multiple people working on multiple parts of the universe.
yeah.
It's neat. It feels very I don't know, it feels like supportive almost, like this idea that you're out there creating the world more and building it more, and other people are doing stuff. It's
It
cool. It's
is
super
really
cool.
cool, and I just hope you're not really mad at me when I kill Wally off in the third book, and
No,
be
don't say
he has
it.
to be retconned from all future projects. I mean, the story demands understanding.
Oh,
Clearly,
I know, I
clearly.
know, I know. No, you can't get rid of Wally.
No,
Wally's
no,
great.
no. He's also, I mean, he and Breathe they grapple for first in my heart.
Yeah, Breathe is really
Yeah,
cool too. Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Okay, so I know that you are working on a third book. And third book, I think the title it's Nightmares of Weirdwood. Is that
Nightmares
going
of
to be the
Weirdwood.
title?
Yep, yep. I mean,
Okay,
something
so
might change
I
between now and next April, but for now, that's what we're going with. Yeah.
so how has it been working on a third book and working on a third book after writing two previous books in a series? How does that feel? How do things change when you get that far along?
It is really bittersweet. Um,
Hmm,
I, have spent the last 5 years with these characters, and
right,
I have fallen in love with them. Arthur included, for sure. Um,
right,
just in a more complex parts of myself that I'm not so happy with way. Um, and I feel a sense of um, uh, I don't know, like triumph, I guess. Like bringing all these characters home, and this is the first time I've written a book in the Weirdwood universe where uh, the road stops. Like when we were working on the first book
right,
and the second one, we could make all of these grandiose predictions about what was going to happen, and we could plant little Easter eggs.
right,
Or I could say, oh, like this is how this character is going to end, or whatever. Then once I'm actually on the ground in the book and it's time to write it, it's like, oh my gosh, I am wrapping all of this up, all of these story threads, all of this feeling, all these promises that I've made early on and in the middle. And I find it extremely exciting, and I have definitely teared up writing a couple of scenes just because I know I'm saying
right,
goodbye to these characters. um,
right.
but I think like the my favorite part about it is there is this fear that I will come up with an idea that will just bring things home so beautifully. And then looking back in the first two books, realizing that that will not work because of something we set up here or something we set up here, or
Right.
just like a throwaway line that I put back here. And so far, there have been a couple of hiccups where I've been like, "Ooh, we're gonna do this. This is super cool." And then looking back and been like, "Oh no." But then it gives me like a new answer or a new spin on a twist that I wanted to do, or a new ending I wanted to bring that
Right.
actually ends up being a bit more exciting. And I this is such I'm going to be like a little bit vague right here, but
Yeah,
it
yeah,
just
sure.
is maybe one of my favorite moments writing ever in the history of my career.
Wow.
I had a thought of how we could like play with the magic and play with things and like turn things inside out and make it just like intriguing and high stakes and everything. And thought, okay, this is perfect. Ran it past Brian, our editor at Holt Macmillan, Brian Geffen, and he was like, well, that doesn't work because of this. And I was like, oh, ah. And basically, we both knew that a scene in Thieves of Weirdwood had this element in it. We knew that it had this element in it because every other scene with this character has this element. And because this
Right.
scene had that element, this twist could not happen. And I was like, you know what?
Right.
I'm just going to check just in case. And I picked up Thieves of Weirdwood and I flipped to that scene. And I, as an author struggling to complete an incredibly complex book, had forgotten to include that element in that scene.
No way.
Way.
Wow.
100% way. And that unlocked a huge transformation in the third book just because. And I know I'm speaking vaguely. You know what? I'm going to tell you. Can I tell you?
Sure.
I'm just going to tell you just a
Well,
tiny, tiny
I
little
was going to
thing.
ask you, is there anything you can share from Nightmares that, sure. So
Oh, ooh.
go
Well,
ahead.
I'll say this vague thing or this less vague thing first. But Lady Weirdwood has
Okay.
her snake in every scene of this book except for one.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Isn't
All
that
right. I won't.
nuts?
Okay. I won't.
I'm going to leave it at
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That's it.
Now I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of what scene it is now. But okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool. Okay.
So, and it was a total accident, and it made everything click. In terms of something that I could share from Nightmares of Weirdwood, uh, I will say there is a 3-page section in one of Breath's chapters that I think is one of the most obnoxious and funniest things I've ever put into a book. That's my spoiler for Nightmares of Weirdwood.
Okay. That's cool. It's interesting. And having read the first two, one of the things I really enjoyed was, to my view, there's some really kind of almost dark, grim pieces, scary stuff in the book, and yet there's also this thread of this of humor that runs through everything. I mean, there's a kind of a lightness. It's that balance between the two is pretty
Oh, thank
cool.
you.
Um, I Breathe obviously serves that, but I think other characters do that in their own ways as well.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to reading that passage. I'm curious, and now my mind's like going all over the place. What could that
Yeah,
be?
yeah,
But you know,
it's something. It's something for sure.
yeah,
I want to point something out really quickly about the titles that I don't really get to talk about very much, but
sure,
we have Thieves of Weirdwood, we have Ghosts of Weirdwood, and I realized like after we wrote this that normally like thieves and ghosts are terrifying things that you want to avoid, right? And both
right,
of these, I'm just thinking, I'm riffing off of your idea that like they both have really scary things, but then they have like threads of light throughout it, because
right.
by the end of each of the books, both the thieves and the ghosts are your heroes, right?
Yeah,
That these
yeah.
normally scary things become just part of your world and become acceptable, And I'm playing with the very same thing with Nightmares.
Well, that's a really interesting point, because it's funny. I had thought about the titles, and I'd thought about the idea of thieves can be a scary thing, and it feels like ghosts can be a little
Hmm.
scarier. And then when I find out nightmares, like that seems even
Yes.
scarier yet. Like this interesting sort of progression where and then you turn those things on their head, kind of in each book.
Yeah.
I'm assuming maybe you will the third one, but
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
see. But yeah,
I got to just now I'm second guessing myself, and I need to make sure that I do that in the next draft. Jess, if you're listening,
right.
hold me accountable.
Right. Okay, so I've got kind of one last question. You've touched on this, so this might not come as a big surprise to our viewers, but I did want to ask you, from a personal perspective, what character in the universe speaks to you the most, resonates with you, who you love, and and kind of why.
Yeah. I think as creators, everything that we make is a piece of ourselves, and Arthur represents the selfish side of myself, the inflated ego that has tried to
Mm,
do the right thing and failed miserably, and then tried to pick up the pieces and do the right thing and maybe fail miserably again, And so
right.
I'm very empathetic to him, and I also am the most frustrated with him, just like I am those parts of myself.
You're
Um,
right.
and Wally is the quiet part, that just wants to listen and wants to help the most innocent of people, creatures, whomever. Breathe is the most fly by the seat of her pants, opens her mouth and says whatever. When I write Breathe,
Right.
I seriously just do this. I don't think about what she's gonna say. I just type and it just flies out. I genuinely feel possessed when I write Breathe. She's the most fun to write. period. If I were to hang out with any of them, I would want to hang out with Brief for sure. Um, but I
Yeah.
also, I have a very special place in my heart for Audrey the ferret. Um,
Oh,
you
okay.
know,
Yeah. Right.
this she's not technically Southern since she's from the Dapplewood, but that's I've been recording the audiobooks, and that's how I give her a Southern accent.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Right. Right. Okay.
So
Cool.
I like this character who's very hospitable, very kind, wants to make sure that everybody's just absolutely comfortable around her. But
But she's also got
yeah,
this edge to
but
her. Yeah.
if you cross
Yeah.
her, she's got claws, right? She's not going to
Right.
like put
Yeah.
up with nonsense. And so I think like Audrey feels the most stable of the characters. Like, I want Audrey energy. I want to just be so polite and loving, and if somebody does me wrong, they're going to hear about it.
Right. Right. It's really it's really fascinating to hear you talk about all the characters. I asked the same question to Luke Miniker in a
Yeah.
previous interview. Who, for those just joining us, Luke Miniker was one of the people who originally created the
Yeah.
universe of Weirdwood, and his answer was it was similar in a sense that as a creator, he was filtering his view of those characters often through who he was as a person and where they fit into his personality or didn't fit into his
Yeah.
personality.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. All right.
no, yeah,
Cool.
no, please go
So,
ahead.
Luke Miniker and I, and I think this is very interesting, right? Because I am playing with characters that he created, and I am, looking at their child worlds, so their youth, and
Right.
so
Right.
I'll say, I think Arthur might have been like this when he was young, and that might rattle Luke a little bit at first because he's like, well, look how perfect and amazing he is. I was like, yeah, let's get him there, through this process. But the funny thing is that Luke and I are such different creators. I mean, from the ground up in
Right.
terms of how we build worlds, in terms of how we build characters. And there have been so many times, because he created these characters, but then I'm like sending them through this particular scenario where he has said, oh, I don't think Wally is like that, I don't think Arthur is like that, and I'll disagree, and then we'll discuss it. And every single time we do that, every time we just like butt our very different fantasy heads together in lore, in world, in characters, or whatever, something
Right.
way better
Yeah.
always sparks between our horns. And
That's
I mean,
super
it's just,
cool.
it's the truth.
Yeah.
If I had not had contact with him or whatever, and just
Right.
written these books all by my lonesome, they would have been a lot worse. They would have been a lot worse than my like pie in the sky, like here's an insane idea that we should go for, and
Right.
Luke's like methodical like world and art building, and then we just find something that just blends both of those so wonderfully, which is it is both the hardest part of collaboration and also the most exciting.
The most
Exactly.
yeah, that's really cool to hear because I've had similar interactions. I mean, working in the board game and trying to take these characters and translate their personalities into game mechanics, so those mechanics still reflect who they are. I mean, Luke and I have had discussions about a number of the characters and where we kind of back and forth, and we have different perceptions on things. And ultimately, what comes out of those dialogues is something better than if either one of us had done it in
Yeah.
isolation. So super cool to hear that's you've had that experience as well when you're working on the books and figuring out who these people are.
And
It's really neat.
it's nice once you just sort of drop your defenses, as a creator, and then you're
Right.
just like, you know what, I know that this is going to go somewhere far more interesting if I just let it.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, listen, I think we're running out of time here. I got to say, Christian, it's been super super fun talking to you. Really great to kind of explore the books more, get your perspective on stuff. I love it. I'm looking forward to the third book. I can hardly wait till Nightmares comes out. Is it next year coming out?
Yep. I
2022?
mean, I'm sure we'll get you a copy the second that it's finished, right? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
You need it.
Well, for those for people watching, again, we probably got people hopefully watching who know the books already and love it, and they'll be looking forward to the third book, and hopefully they'll be looking forward to the board game. And for you board gamers out there watching this, again, if you love the world through the board game, you've got this great series of books that you can go out and start buying right now and reading. So it's really great to kind of to talk to you and see these other facets of the universe. So I really appreciate the time.
Mike,
So
back at
thanks
you.
again.
This has been an absolute pleasure. I think the board game looks phenomenal. I am overjoyed that there's a brief mechanic. And I'm excited to see you again and play the game and meet you in person.
Me too. I look forward to it. It would be a lot of fun,
Awesome.
Christian. I look forward to it.
Right.
So thanks again to Christian for sitting down and joining me today. It was really great to talk to him. Really interesting guy, great author who's written these great books. Again, definitely check them out if you're interested in learning more about Weirdwood. And as always, please like and subscribe if you enjoy what we're doing here. And if you got any questions for me or even Christian, leave them in the comments below. We'd love to hear your feedback. And so until next time, keep board gaming, board gamers.